Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later.
Beijing, though, has denied any talks on a deal with the U.S. are happening while calling on Washington to revoke all tariffs.
At present, there have been no economic or trade negotiations between China and the United States. Any claims regarding the progress in China-US economic and trade negotiations are groundless and lack factual basis.
Let's bring in Minmin Lo, our China correspondent. She's been on top of this story here. So, Minmin, we have, completely conflicting descriptions of the reality, or, at least, both can't be right, both can't be wrong. So, what do we make of this?
Yeah, it just shows that both sides are so far apart on their views that they can't even agree on the facts. And essentially what China's Commerce Ministry is saying is that Trump is lying, and Trump is there calling the reporter saying that his reporting is wrong. And bear in mind, this comes as the U.S. is hosting the G20 finance ministers meeting, as well as the IMF and the World Bank meetings. And that's why you have these Chinese officials, including the PBOC Governor Pan Gongsheng, the Finance Minister Lan Foan. They are in Washington now for these meetings. So this is actually the first opportunity for both sides to have face-to-face meetings since Liberation Day. But at least from the China side, we are not hearing any talk of any bilateral meeting happening. Although Trump is saying the two sides met, he refused to say who met whom. So it's all a little bit mysterious. But again, this comes as China is demanding that the U.S. removes all unilateral tariffs. But Lan Foan did reiterate at the Finance Minister Summit that China still advocates for dialogue on an equal basis, and it says that this trade war is really affecting global economic stability.
Okay, just to mention as well. Let me just see. I believe we have some lines coming through. Pan Gongsheng, he did speak. Oh, here we go. In fact, there we go. The PBOC governor to Minmin's point here. So, just to reiterate a couple of things, we know most of these anyway. So, monetary policy will remain moderately loose. As Avril was just pointing out, there we are going into the weekend where, again, we're waiting for more easing coming through, and possibly that could come in the weekend. Okay, the headline has just now gone red. It's reiterating it's part of the, okay, we know that. They're going to defend global economic stability. Pan Gongsheng is also urging cooperation to keep global economic stability. And I think this is really a reiteration of China's position, overall position, that there are no winners in this trade war. Again, he is speaking at the G20 meeting, and that they're also reiterating their support and promise to continue to drive China's economy, part of which, underneath his mandate, of course, will be keeping rates moderately low, policy moderately loose. Minmin, let me bring you back in. Something rare took place on the Chinese media. People's Daily, yes, published in English, which is not something we normally see. What does that mean, and what did they say? Yeah, so this editorial in English is clearly targeted at a foreign audience. Yep. And essentially what this article is saying is it's positioning China as a power that is speaking on behalf of the global south, because the article made a lot of mention of Africa, of Latin America, the Caribbeans, the BRICS countries, and essentially is saying that the U.S. has been weaponizing tariffs, that the U.S. has been ignoring the conditions in developing countries and distorting the reasons for its trade deficit, and saying that the U.S. has been reaping the benefits of this division of labor globally, but now it is undermining the rules that underpin free trade. So China is taking countermeasures to protect its legitimate rights and interests, but not only for itself, but really to defend international fairness and justice for the rest of the world. And the article ended with China again reiterating that it is keeping its doors open, it is willing to share its developmental opportunities with the rest of the world, and really advocating for all countries in the global south to come together to counter this global hegemony.
So, Minmin, that's sort of the U.S.-China framing. What about China with the EU?
Yes, this was first reported by the Financial Times, but China is prepared to lift some sanctions on EU officials in a bid to work towards a détente. And these sanctions had been put in place in retaliation to Brussels accusing China for its human rights record. And lifting those sanctions would be seen as a symbolic move that could help pave the way, perhaps, to both sides picking up again discussions of that investment pact that had been put on ice after the sanctions came in. At the same time, we know that EU has been considering potential price commitments from China on the EV front to replace those up to 45% tariffs on Chinese EVs. And again, China showed another gesture of goodwill in its retaliation against those EV tariffs. It opened up a probe into French cognac, but China has now delayed the conclusion of that probe by 3 months, easing off pressure on French producers. And this also comes as we know that EU officials are looking at a trip to Beijing in July, again showing an indication of their willingness to travel all the way to Beijing when there was reluctance from President Xi to go to Brussels. And again, both sides leaning towards each other to counter against the impact of Trump's tariffs.